This is Under the Influence, a show about coercive control. Please be aware that this show covers subjects some may find distressing.
Hello and welcome. Today we are speaking to Alex Barnes-Rose, who is a former Scientologist and now an activist. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me along.
Grateful to have you. I'll just go into the questions. Can you tell us briefly about your story of how you got into Scientology?
Yeah, absolutely. So in a nutshell, I joined Scientology when I was a teenager. I walked into the London org, which is on Queen Victoria Street near Blackfriars, in central London. I did a personality test. I kind of wanted to know more about what Scientology was because I'd heard so much in the news and in the media. So went in to find out a bit more. And next thing you know, I was recruited onto staff. I worked at the org full time when I was about 16 years old. I just finished school and worked there over the summer holidays before I went to sixth form and did my A-levels. And then left staff to go and do my A-levels in sixth form. And then after I finished that, I then went back into the org and worked full time. I was posted as director of public book sales. Before being kicked out and branded a potential trouble source. Effectively, that means I'm a bad person, and was kicked out. And yeah, so that happened. And then it was a couple of years I was still considering myself a Scientologist, but trying to figure things out and make it work that I could still continue doing it, but then just drifted away. And yeah, I've been out of Scientology for a few years now, but started speaking out in probably December, I think just gone was the first time I shared my story. And from there was a lot of calls to start a YouTube channel and do that. So that's kind of what I'm doing now is just, sharing my experiences, my stories, and giving other people a platform to do the same.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Can you tell us what the purification rundown is?
Yeah, so the purification rundown is one of the first things that you do in Scientology on the bridge. So in Scientology, there's a thing called the Bridge to Total Freedom, which is kind of like a progress chart, if you like, a way of progressing through your spiritual journey to, you want to achieve the state of clear, which is, the main goal in Scientology. And then there's different levels of things in this bridge. Essentially, it's a way of getting from where you are to spiritual enlightenment. And the purification rundown is the first major step on the bridge that you would do. You can do this at any church Scientology, whether that's in a city like London, or whether there's another one in Birmingham that's open, that's ideal, which means there's a big church being renovated. They all have saunas in them. And essentially the purification rundown is a program of taking vitamins and sitting in the sauna for extended periods of time. The idea behind it is that by taking high quantities of vitamins and sitting in a sauna for extended periods of time, you sweat out the toxins in your body that your body has accumulated. The idea behind it was written by L. Ron Hubbard, who founded Scientology, and he said that your body stores toxins and drugs and things in the fatty tissue in your body. So if you were to take a load of paracetamol or something, a painkiller, 30 years ago, there'll still be a small residue of that left in the fatty tissue in your body, which scientifically is absolute rubbish. That's not a thing that is scientifically proven. But that's what he said, and that's what he thought. It was written in the 1950s, and he wasn't a scientist, so that's what he thought. But essentially, the purification rundown is a way of getting rid of those toxins. You sweat them out. The vitamins loosen up the particles, and then you sweat them out in the sauna, which is scientifically not actually possible, but that's what you do. And it's the first step on this so-called bridge.
So sort of like very early on when you first joined.
Yeah, I mean, there are tons of courses and things you can do in Scientology before starting on your major bridge actions, on your bridge journey. So, for example, if you were to go into a church Scientology, interested to find out more, there are these things called life improvement courses, and they are based on books that L. Ron Hubbard wrote. They are, focused on areas like how to improve your marriage, or how to communicate better, or if how to be more efficient and be, if you have problems with finances, like all these sort of life topics, right? There are little courses that are 30 or 40 pounds that you can go and do. And the idea is that they give you tools and tips and techniques to help improve in those areas. So those things are more likely the first thing anyone would do in Scientology nowadays, because it's very entry level. It's not a big commitment. That's how they got me. They were like, cool, well, you've heard all of these stories about what Scientology is. Well, why don't you just try one of these courses and find out for yourself? Right? Because there's no commitment. You come in, you read this, and you do the course. And if it helps, great. If it doesn't, it's only 40 quid. So who cares? Right. And you kind of think, oh, okay, yeah, fair enough, right? And then you do the course and you realize whilst doing that course that no one's locked you in a room or forced you to disconnect from anyone. So you think, okay, well, maybe it isn't as bad as it seems. And then that's how the program starts, right?
Yeah.
But so you wouldn't go into a church and they would sell you the pure straight away. I mean, it might happen every now and then, but they would get you on these sort of very entry level courses. And once you've done enough of those to start realizing or thinking that Scientology is helpful, that's when they would go, well, look, let's get you on the bridge and let's get you to do the purification rundown, and then get you on your journey to clear, which is a state of being where you don't have a reactive part of your mind, which is the goal of Scientology. I know there's a lot of lingo and a lot of stuff to get your head around, but it is all quite wacky.
Okay. You mentioned just now, no one locks you in a room. Were you at any point locked into a room?
Yeah, so when I said that, I mean at the very beginning, right? The whole idea is to try and get you to start on Scientology courses and get you involved. So especially in London, we were very aware of the reputation Scientology has. So we were very sort of trying to, what's the word? We were aware that Scientology had the reputation it had. So we went out of our way to try and be a bit more not laid back, but not coming across as intense or weird or kind of creepy or like culty. We were aware of what people said, so we tried really hard not to be like that. So they're a little bit more relaxed in terms of the way that we did things in London, but that doesn't mean that Scientology isn't applied once you get in. So the idea when you first start is that, you just do little things here and there, you try little techniques, you read a book, and it's all very surface level and very fine and happy and cool. But once you get in, you start learning what's called Scientology ethics, which is the way Scientology like to, they think that if you were to live your life by their ethical standards, applying Scientology techniques and technology, they call it, you will live a happier, healthier life, and everyone will be happier and everyone's in a better place if you apply Scientology ethics. So this is a really long way of answering your question, sorry. But essentially, yes, there was a time when I was locked in a room. So I was kicked out of the church at one point and then rejoined, and I was upset about the first time I got kicked out. And I was kind of saying, no, I'm upset. And they put me into an auditing session, which is Scientology spiritual counseling. That's the kind of crux of what Scientology is and what it does. And so I was put in a session to make me feel better about the fact I was kicked out the first time. And I didn't. I felt worse. I, brought something up like a counseling session would do. It kind of brought something up. I was upset, and I said, I want Scientology to work for me, and it's not working right now because I'm more upset at the moment than I was before. You guys kicked me out. And they told me that I had to do my OW write-up, which is overt and withhold. So this is effectively confessionals, right? You've got to write up your transgressions, what you've done wrong against the church. And I was crying. I was like, I can't think of anything. I haven't done anything wrong against the church. You guys kicked me out. You're the guys that have done something here, not me. Anyway, I wasn't allowed to leave the room until I'd done it. Got up to leave. The guy put his hand on the door handle. Like I was locked in this room, not allowed to leave until I'd written up what I'd done wrong against the church. Ended up doing it, and at the end I remember thanking the guy, right? I think this is the one thing I want to try and get across in everything I do publicly about Scientology is Scientologists are genuinely good people. Like, they want to help people. That's why they're doing it. And they believe Scientology is the best way to help people. So when you hear about these stories of manipulation or abuse or whatever, I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but the people doing it might not necessarily be aware that that's what they're doing, right? So this guy who locked me in the room, I thanked him because in my mind, doing the OW write-up, writing up what I'd done wrong against the church was the right thing to do because that's applying Scientology technology, and therefore that's going to lead me to live a happier, healthier life. So as much as I didn't want to be locked in the room at the time, at the end of the whole situation, I was like, thank you for locking me in the room because you made sure I applied the technology. You made sure I did the right thing. So therefore, locking me in the room was the correct thing to do. Thank you, man. Right. And that's the mindset a Scientologist is in, because you think this is the right thing. You're helping humanity here, even if it hurts you a little bit in the short term. You're helping humankind.
And what do you think of that experience now? The whole about being locked in a room. Do you still think about it the same way?
I mean, obviously, I'm not a Scientologist anymore. I speak out about Scientology. There's no way that I would be able to go back, even if I wanted to. It's not something I believe in or subscribe to. But I look at it, I look at these experiences I try and look at them in a fair way. And when I tell these stories, right, I try really hard to not come across in an attacking, negative kind of way, because a lot of Scientologists in Scientology, you're taught that suppressive people, who are the people that speak out about Scientology, are these nasty people that don't want you to succeed in life, and they're trying to make Scientology look bad and stop people from doing it and all of this. And there's a picture that they paint about a suppressive person. And actually, by being reasonable and kind of helping people understand the mindset a Scientologist can be in, my goal is to help people like really understand what it actually means to be a Scientologist, particularly here in the UK. So I look back on it and go, yeah, that was a horrible thing. And I don't particularly want to be locked in a room ever in my life by anyone. But I don't look back at that as incident as traumatic, because at the time I didn't like it. But the people doing it were doing it because they thought that was the right thing to do. And the same with my book selling. I was the director of public book sales. So I was in charge of all the books sold in London and in Malta, strangely, was one of my territories. And so there are people inevitably that are Scientologists now because I sold them a book, or I was responsible for selling them a book. And you look back on it and go, well, yeah, that's not a great thing that I've done. But I didn't do it because I wanted these people to be manipulated or coercively controlled. I did it because at the time I thought selling them the book was the best way to help them in their spiritual journey. So yeah, I try and look at these things in a really fair way, and help people understand where your mind is at when you're in Scientology, rather than just painting a bad picture that says, look at these guys manipulating and coercing people, because yeah, that's what they do, but they're doing it from a good place, you know.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Speaking of books, how did they manipulate people into buying books or into joining Scientology with the stress test?
Yeah, so really good questions, by the way. I can tell you've been watching a lot or reading up on it. So Scientology stress tests that's the main way that we would sell books in Scientology. So you probably would have seen Scientologists out there selling books on the streets. I do a whole video that I break down on how the stress test itself works on my YouTube channel. Little plug for myself. Anyone wants to go and check me out, Apostate Alex is my name on YouTube. But essentially, the stress test is the way that Scientologists will sell their book Dianetics, which is the first big book in the kind of world of Scientology and Dianetics by L. Ron Hubbard. It's called The Modern Science of Mental Health. It has no scientific evidence behind it or experiments or anything like that. It's just something that he made up himself based on other people's philosophies and ideas. But essentially, you'll see Scientologists around London, particularly, going book selling. And this is what I used to do as my job as director of public book sales, to sell books, right? And the stress test is a way that we would do that. So we would have a table with a couple of chairs on either side with a little display of books, and a thing called the e-meter, which is a really important tool in the world of Scientology that's used in their auditing spiritual counseling sessions. It kind of looks a bit like an easy bake oven. It's on the top of the table. It's got these metal cans that look like soup cans, and the idea is it's a bit like a lie detector. It works to help people locate sources of trouble or stress or whatever in their life. It is used in a very particular way in Scientology, but in terms of the stress tests, we would take these e-meters out and body root people, which is just another way of saying giving out flyers and getting them, hello sir, would you like a stress test, or would you want to find out what's causing you stress in your life? And bring them over to the table, sit them down, and use the e-meter to locate areas of stress or trauma or whatever in someone's life. And the whole process of selling the book is done through the guise of helping you figure out a solution to whatever is causing you trauma or stress or upset in your life. So the stress test is a way that Scientologists use as e-meter to figure out what's wrong with someone or what they want to change about their life. And then we would then present Dianetics, the book, as the solution to that. There's a very specific way of doing that. And there's a script, a pattern that is followed that's been around since the 50s. And it's interesting. But again, you have to realize that the people selling this book they are trying to find your what's called ruin, which is the thing that's ruining your life. That's what they're trying to find. But they're not doing that because they want to manipulate you. They don't want to do that because they want to manipulate your emotions. But they do absolutely do that. What they want to do is find your ruin, and so that they can help you realize Scientology is the answer. What they are doing is manipulating you and getting you to tell someone what your problems are in life and telling them that this book is going to solve all those problems. It's not a good thing to do to someone. There used to be a saying called "crying is buying." If someone was sat there in front of me crying, then that means I found out what it is that they're upset about, and that means they're going to buy the book because we've made it real to them. It's a horrible thing to do to someone, but Scientologists are doing it because they genuinely think this book is going to help this person.
So the people selling the books, they're both being sincere in trying to help people, but also trying to get people to buy the book.
Absolutely. I mean, in trying to help someone, the way of helping them is buying the book, right? Scientology is the answer to that problem. And so when you say trying to help them, the way they're trying to help them is by selling them the book. Unfortunately, Scientology does more harm than good. And it's unfortunate that they believe that this is the way of helping someone, but it does come from a good place in their mind.
How did you get out?
So I was kicked out. So when we talked about being locked in a room earlier, because I was upset that a Scientology session didn't work, and I was upset that I'd been kicked out the first time. The second time I got kicked out because I had done something terribly wrong against the church, and I was declared a potential trouble source, which essentially means I'm connected to a suppressive person, someone who's anti-Scientology, and I've got to declare, I have to send it to you, and it literally says word for word that I'm using a planned campaign against Scientology to get auditing for free. I was in a worse situation well before I even started into Scientology, and I blame Scientology on as the cause of all of my problems and upset in life. There's this whole declare that says what they think I am, and I can see where they're coming from, but it's not true. I mean, I was begging to stay. They kicked me out. I didn't want to leave. But yeah, after being out for several years, I was kind of drifting away. I wasn't in that place of being indoctrinated every day. I wasn't spending all day every day surrounding myself by staff members and so on. And so you kind of naturally drift away, and I went about my life. And it wasn't until maybe a year or so ago, that I realized it was still having an impact on me and the way that I think and process information. And that's when I started to look at in a bit more detail how this thing is affecting me, even though I haven't set foot into a Church of Scientology in like 6 years or something like that. So, yeah, spent some time with a counselor, a therapist, looking at the way it has programmed my brain to think and process information. And that's when I realized how deep Scientology actually goes in your brain. And there are many different types of potential trouble source, and I was declared potential trouble source type D, which is responsible for condition case, which is, as mentioned earlier, that means that I have blamed Scientology for the upset and problems in my life, and that Scientology is the root problem of everything, root cause of all the problems I have. And in this declare, it actually says, in actual fact, I was worse than I could imagine even before I joined Scientology, and Scientology has had no impact on me, and it's actually not going to be able to help me at all, because I was worse before I even joined Scientology. So that's what potential trouble source PTS type D was, and that's what I was declared.
Wow. Wow. What would you say to your younger self or to someone getting into Scientology now?
I mean, I think that's a really hard question, because there's not one thing that you could say to anyone that is involved in Scientology that will help them come out. I mean, I've spent years as the director of public book sales as a public facing Scientologist, selling books and dealing with people coming at me with a plethora of stories and questions about Xenu, the space aliens, and manipulation and abuse and child trafficking and all of these horrible things you hear about in Scientology. I would come face to face with these allegations every single day, and yet I was still a committed Scientologist. So there's not really anything you can say to someone that would stop them joining, or say to myself, because you got to remember, I'd heard all this stuff before I joined and I wanted to find out more. I think if anything, it's more making sure you are aware in your mind of the questions that you are able to ask and the answers that you get. One of the examples I use a lot is the policy of disconnection. So in Scientology, there's all these stories of disconnected families, Scientology forcing families to disconnect from each other and not speak to each other, not talk to each other, not eat, like no contact whatsoever with a family member that's anti-Scientology. They're literally breaking apart families. It's a really horrible thing to do to someone. And there's lots of proven evidence of this happening across the world. I remember going into Scientology and asking, I've heard this story of disconnection. Is that something you guys do? And the answer I got was, no, it's actually it's blown out of proportion a little bit. The media have got it wrong. And they would put it into perspective of like, well, say, for example, you have a friend or somebody in your friendship group that's being a bit mean to you or not very nice, and you instinctively think, oh, I'm not going to spend so much time with that person because I don't really like them, I don't get on with them. You would keep them at arm's length and not talk to them. That's what disconnection is, and that makes sense. Why would you want to spend time with someone that's horrible to you or stopping you achieving in life? And in the moment, your mind goes, yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I can see that. And they go, yeah, so people blow this disconnection thing out of proportion in Scientology. And that's not what we do. We don't disconnect families. We give people the option to disconnect in a formal way from people that are stopping them achieving in life, which is true. That is what like disconnection is in Scientology. However, what they neglect to say is that there are situations where, say, for example, you have a brother or a mother or a family member that doesn't like Scientology. They've read lots about it and they think you're in this horrible coercive group. It's not possible for you to progress and proceed in Scientology without disconnecting from that person. Doesn't matter if they're a family member or not. So then you have to choose between your faith and, say, for example, you have a family that you've raised in Scientology, that your kids and your wife or husband are in Scientology, and you then have to choose between, do you disconnect from your wife or husband and children, or do you disconnect from your mother? Because you have to choose a side. That's a horrible situation to be in. And that's the reality of what disconnection is. Because this person, your mother or brother or whoever it is identified as an anti-Scientologist, you have to disconnect from them if you want to continue in Scientology. So I think this is a really long way of answering your question, but I think there's not really one thing you can say to anyone. It's just kind of be aware of the answers you're being given and think critically and really ask as many questions as you can, because that's what I did. I used to ask questions all the time. And ultimately, that's what led to me being kicked out, because they want you to follow the party line. They don't want you to ask questions and think for yourself. That's really what they don't like. And actually, that's the best way of doing it, is saying, well, what about this? I've read this policy and I've read this policy, and they both say completely opposite things. Which one is correct? And yeah, just think for yourself and ask questions. But ultimately, I would say don't get involved if you're getting involved in Scientology. You know, that's the bottom line. Is stop now while you can.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have. Thank you for your time, Alex.
No problem. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. See you.